North Queensland Cowboys. Hopefully this year, the best team in the comp behind about 8 other teams, but that's fine. We'll cop that. Just like your Eels, mate. Do you think we're a good chance of a bounce back this year?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of teams that could be like that, and Cowboys are definitely one of them. I think they were disrupted a bit with the Lukey, the Luciano, and the Nanai injuries and suspensions. So I think with all of them there, they could hum along pretty well this year. However, with all of them fit now, it kind of pushes it down some of these other fantasy options.
Yeah, well, that's what we're here for, isn't it? The fantasy side, and there's probably a couple of guys on offer and a few that we might have a look at through, maybe 4, 5, 6 rounds, potentially some, hopefully, fallen guns, let's say. But let's kick it off with Tom Chester. I brought him in for a nice 3-week play before, unfortunately, he got injured last year. But he was one of the only guys I felt in the Cowboys team that was having an absolute dig each and every game. And if there happens to be an injury to Drinkwater, is he the man?
Yeah, I think he is. He did a fantastic job in the, what was it, 3 or 4 games that he was there last year, and priced at 337. We've seen he's got a reasonably relevant game. Just chuck him in if he's there. It just probably won't be there to start the year, but as soon as he is, get him in.
Beautiful. Jake Clifford, the next guy, he's third in the half 5/8 rankings. And if we do happen to lose Townsend, then I think he could be the guy to come and slot in. And he'll be fairly highly priced. I believe he's in the sort of mid 500s or so. But yeah, one to have a look at if that happens. Ruben Cotter, the big man on this list of 587K, priced at 42.7. You've got him projected between that 48 to 53. And it could be anywhere, couldn't it? He could. I suppose the biggest part here is it's probably fairly low downside. But what do you think of the upside?
Yeah, as you said, there is upside, and the floor of that upside is reasonably good. It's just really hard to pinpoint how far it will go. So Cotter switched sort of to lock at the end of the year and played pretty much 60 minutes a game, apart from one game where they absolutely belted the Tigers and he just went off because there's no point. They'd already won the game. So I think his minutes probably are going to be good. I don't expect Carrigan minutes, but the thing is, will he boost his PPM back up? Because it really dropped last year for some reason. So there might be a few things that go on. I do think high 40s are pretty likely. It's just whether he can push into that low 50s as well.
This looks like we're fighting a couple of things, hey? We're fighting minutes and we're fighting his PPM drop, right? So if we can get both of them as a bounce back, he's probably a 50s guy, but that's two things we've got to fight through, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I do think one of them will compete with the other, or like one of them will sort of work and the other sort of won't. So I do
Yeah.
think around that sort of 50 mark bang on is probably around where it'll sit. So not 10 points value, but there'll be enough to be enticing. And I can see why. Nearly 20% of people have got him in their teams. He's definitely a decent option at least.
Yeah, for sure. And at 587K, I suppose the question mark is, do you go right up and get a guy that's going to be really consistent, or do you take the punt on Cotter here at that price? Do you go lower to someone that probably has a little less downside in the fact that you could use that extra cash somewhere else? Whereas Cotter, you are tying a fair bit up there. So there's a lot to think about as to if he becomes a buy or not. Other examples like him, I think, are guys like Tavita Totola at his 480 odd price. It's a bit of an awkward price. And you could go down or up, or you could just go with him and kind of it just work out okay. But I think someone like Ruben, he's probably not going to destroy your team if you don't. Like, you're not going to get beaten so much by
Yeah.
him if you don't own him, kind of thing at that price. So yeah, he's gonna be a fun one to see how many end up with him in their side. Tom Dearden at 531. So glad we re-signed him. But what do you think? Until Chad Townsend isn't there and Dearden becomes 7, that he's probably not a fantasy option.
Yeah, he just doesn't quite have the base to be a fantastic option for fantasy. He needs those kick meters and he needs a little bit more involvement, probably close to the line. But yeah, you're dead right. Great that they re-signed him. He's a fantastic player. Only the top clubs can keep their elite 5/8s.
Cop that, you rival club, you, hey, across the ditch. Too good. Robert Darby, 298K. We have a lot of interest in him, don't we? And probably going to need an injury, aren't we?
Yeah, pretty likely. He's a little bit down in the pecking order, but close enough to be one that we can chuck in our black books, chuck a star on him, and just chuck him in your team when he comes up. He's sort of like a Will Warbrick type of scorer. He's got a lot of meters and a few tackle breaks in him. So he can reach his break even without doing much at all. So I think it's just not really a difficult decision. Just chuck him in your team when he eventually comes into the side.
Yeah, and you said a 39 average in Q Cup as well, so that's pretty good to look at there. All right, plenty of chat. Plenty you've got written down here on Scotty Drinkwater at 715K. Price up a little bit, unfortunately, at 52. Had an absolute belter of a mid-season last year. Where do we see him? Is he a guy that we have a look at a little bit later? Leave him for now?
Yeah, I think he's one that you probably leave for 5 or 6 rounds in, potentially. It's a little bit like Tedesco. Tedesco often starts the season slow and then he bounces back. But he's somebody we've seen have pedigree for a number of years. Drinkwater's sort of only in the last couple started to become that relevant borderline keeper. So it's really tough to spend up at the start of the year for an elite wing fullback. It's that mid-season was amazing. It's just that will he do that from the get-go? I don't think it will, probably with a little bit of early rust, but later on, quite possibly.
I'm still having mini nightmares on that swinging arm. Just saying. Tom Duffy, fourth in line for the halves at the moment. Plenty of talent. That's probably all we know at this stage, right?
Yeah, good player. He'll be around in a couple of years and we'll have a look at him then.
Maybe he can take over from Chatty. All right, Kyle Felt, 485. He was one of those guys that did really well mid-season after not scoring any tries for the first part. Very similar to that of Xavier Coates there at the Storm, and the Mark from the Amateurs was talking about that try regression. It worked perfectly for him. It could happen again at some point, but we're worried about him being in the team at all, right?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of people pushing him for that. There's Robert Darby, as we were talking about, and there's also potentially someone like Valame who might do that as well if they shuffle up their team a little bit. But yes, and while he's in the team, and while he's priced at his mid-30s average, not somebody you want until he's cheap.
Exactly. Finnair Firiaki at 272K, still learning his name. What are our thoughts on him? It looks like he's probably going to improve as a player. He's got a decent amount of talent. Minutes-wise, the main issue there?
Yeah, bench edges aren't somebody you really want to go for. Maybe he moves into the middle a little bit as well. But yeah, with Lukey, Luciano, and Nanai all fit now because they were missing for quite big portions of last year, I
Yeah.
don't see a way for him to be fantasy relevant for this year.
Yep. Josefsky, 441K, average 32 last year. Just a too awkward price. It probably doesn't make the side, right?
Yep.
Granville played a part as a cash cow last year. Don't see it happening again. Are you agreeing in that?
Yeah, like he got a role because of those outs. And now that he's not absolute basement price and there are more players around him, just less reason to grab him.
Yep. And Cohen Hess, just a guy that's probably just going to take minutes and not be relevant for us.
Yeah, he's another one that's probably just going to move back 5, 10, 15 minutes to let these other guys that are now fit into the team.
Very fair. Val Holmes is 637, average 46 last year. One of our top tier elite guns in the center position. Would you spend up any money in the centers yourself, or is he one you probably wait until we've grown our team value?
I would probably wait. He was one of the few centers that actually did start off pretty well last year, despite starting very expensive. But yeah, not too much upside here. You're paying what you get, elite gun. He didn't have overly many tries last year or assists, which was interesting, but that's one for later on when they're firing.
For sure. Zach Labart priced himself out of any contention into our sides, or any consideration, I should say, at 509K. Lots of talent, I suppose. Personally, I'm just hoping for him to play well footy-wise, because I don't think he's going to be relevant for us.
Nah, he hasn't played that many NRL games, and when he's already at 37, you want to keep a center average from him, somebody that you don't have a lot of confidence in. So one to watch and not to buy.
For sure. Lucy Leilua, 608K, very up and down scorer these days. He was very consistent at the Tigers, but minutes and all that changes a lot for the Cows, doesn't it?
Yeah, he played 80 most of the back of the season for the Cows, so it makes me think that he'll probably start at 80 minutes for the beginning of the year, but there's no guarantee that he keeps it like he could move into the middle for a few minutes instead of Lukey and play 60 instead of 80. So there's just a lot of things that can go wrong with him and not a lot of huge upsides. So probably want to just let go through as well.
For sure. Him, Lukey, likely not going to be starting. If we did get him as a starter, is it still too risky?
Probably at this price, yes. Um, I'm just not confident in him playing tons and tons of minutes. The reason why he was good last year was because in about 50 or 60 minutes, he scored a couple of tries and did reasonably well, but now he's priced higher because of that. So not really any value left.
For sure. Sam McIntyre won't be in the rotation, I believe. Jordan McLean, 507K, just a very awkward price. Not too much to say with him. Jeremiah Nanai, could you see any bounce back from him, considering he played much better the year before and was pretty poor in lower minutes when he played last year?
Yeah, I think there's definitely scope for him to bounce back. Uh, Classic case of second year syndrome if you've ever seen it. But yeah, until he starts playing really big minutes, he's not somebody you really want to consider. He's pretty inconsistent, just like Luciano.
Thoughts on Griffin Neem and if there's any scope for him to be sort of a top dog in this pack?
I think he's a good player and can probably slowly move into a bigger role, but he's just not going to start with it. So not somebody to actually get on.
And Pua Avase at 230K, fringe top 30 guy. So we'll speak about him if he ever comes relevant. Reece Robson, 660K, helped me out a fair bit last year and then got me in trouble in my squad anyway around that Origin time where he really fell off a cliff, didn't he? Thoughts on him as bouncing back?
I think he's a pretty good bounce back candidate, to be honest. A lot of the hookers fell away a bit as the centers started to pick up. The ball was put out to the edges a lot more quickly. Hookers lost a few tackles and a few other stats. He still did have a very, very low try scoring rate for somebody who's historically had like about a 30% or over burrow over rate. So I think he can definitely be a low 50s guy if the Cowboys do all right. And early season, he will get those base stats as it goes through the middle, as the teams figure out and get the rust off for the year.
For sure. Murray Talangi, we kind of waiting for him to potentially drop some price before we look at him.
Yeah, wingers that are priced in the 400s and 500s aren't keepers and aren't cows, really. So not much.
Jason Tamalolo, do you reckon you'll suck a few people in this year?
Yeah, the name will always do that. There's a few that will go for him, but yeah, just hasn't been a big name even in the NRL the last couple of years because his minutes have been managed. He's getting a little bit older. Hopefully he makes it to the end of his contract okay. And yeah, just not fantasy relevant anymore.
This is a strange one because he played so well coming up and into that final series a couple of years ago, and last year was just a shocker, isn't it? So hasn't been priced this low since his like rookie year. So pretty crazy. Tynor Brown probably slowly down the pecking order and minutes wise not big. Chad Townsend at 506 there. Our kicking in general play and tackles man. So there's no real upside on Chatty there. Vitalea, I had a good laugh at your comment on him. Can you talk through that one?
Oh, for anyone who's been playing fantasy more than just last year, I think it was the year before, he came onto the scene at base price. We thought, oh yeah, this is going to be a really great option. Put him out on teams, and he scored, what was it, 7, 13 with a try, and 13 with a try. And we thought, how is it possible for someone to be this bad at fantasy? Yeah, so uh, for him popping up at 100K more expensive now, I just don't see him being super duper valuable.
Yeah, pretty funny at that. Semi Valame, averaged 40 last year, best year of his career. So likely just to be at the top of his price range, right?
Yeah, a lot of tries, a lot of line breaks, but not the elite run meters and tackle breaks like your Greg Marshus or your To'o.
Definitely. Let's move to our pack predictor that you come up with here with their PPMs, the minutes that you think they're going to achieve there, and then some value at that. So McLean and Tamalolo up top there. Robson, clearly an 80-minute guy each and every week. And then talk us through sort of the minutes and any value for the guys remaining.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder to see because there's a few of these guys who can do the same role. So Leilua and Lukey, I could both see as being somebody who can play sort of 40 minutes at edge and then 20 minutes in the middle. Even Nanai not playing 80 um, can adjust his minutes depending on what the game is. So honestly, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and I think it's just going to start off the way it finished last season with Leilua playing 80 and then them playing it by ear as they go. But the main thing to note here, as you look over at the value, there's a lot of players that are actually quite losing a bit of value, like -5 and a few over 10 points potential loss in value, just because all of these players are now fit and their inflated rel from last year will now go back down by 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, so basically we just have to wait for potentially some injuries and the like there. And really the only guys that you'd find relevant other than Robson that you've got him at 4 points of value. And then Cotter there would be a Lukey or potentially a Leilua if he had a pretty average start. It's a bit of an underwhelming pack for potential value, isn't it?
Yeah, they've sort of all cancelled each other out. It's just the 13 and the 9.
Yep, pretty excited about that. Any other thoughts on the Cows to finish up?
Cowboys, I think, will be an interesting team to watch this year because, as you said, I think they'll be bounced back. I think it's going to depend on how much Dearden is going to start stepping up this year as Chad Townsend slowly fades off the scene. If they can do that well and use the fullback well like they did in the middle of last year, they'll go pretty well.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. And I hope your Eels go well also. And we'll get on to talking about them very soon. The Dolphins will be the next team you'll see in a video, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that. We'll see you in the next one.